The reason this question causes so much uncertainty is that testing timelines can feel confusing at first. Families begin researching schools and quickly discover that many private schools require either the ISEE or the SSAT as part of their application process. They see references to percentiles, they hear other parents talk about testing strategies, and suddenly it feels like there's an entire system families are expected to understand. These are very normal questions because testing can feel like one of the most concrete parts of the admissions process. Unlike interviews or essays, testing produces a number. And when families see that number, it's natural to assume that timing the test correctly is extremely important. But what many families discover as they learn more about private school admissions is that testing timelines are actually more flexible than they first appear. Today, we're going to talk about testing timelines, and more specifically, when students typically take the ISEE or SSAT during the admissions process. Before discussing timing, it helps to understand the role testing actually plays in private school admissions. Standardized testing provides admissions committees with one additional piece of information about a student's academic readiness. Because applicants come from many different schools with different grading systems and curricula, testing offers a standardized way for admissions teams to evaluate certain academic skills. But testing is never the entire story. Admissions committees review testing results alongside transcripts, teacher recommendations, interviews, and other parts of the application. Testing helps provide context, but it's just one piece of the larger academic profile. Once families begin researching private school admissions, the next practical question becomes, when do students actually take the test? That timeline allows testing to be completed before applications are submitted. But there's one important detail many families don't realize at first. Many students take the test more than once. In reality, many students benefit from having the opportunity to take the test again after becoming familiar with the format. One strategy I often recommend to families is beginning the testing process earlier than you may initially expect. Rather than waiting until fall of the application year, some families choose to have their child take a baseline test in May. The purpose of this early test is not to achieve a perfect score. You can see how they perform across different sections. You can identify areas of strength, and you can see where additional preparation might make a meaningful difference. Instead of guessing where your child stands academically, you now have a clear baseline, and that baseline makes it much easier to make informed decisions about the next steps. Having that information early allows families to approach the rest of the admissions timeline much more strategically. And, perhaps more importantly, it reduces pressure. Because the first test is no longer the only opportunity, it's simply a starting point. That's why many families find it helpful to start the testing process earlier in the admissions timeline. Not because the first test must be perfect, but because earlier testing allows greater flexibility, and flexibility tends to make the entire process feel calmer for both the students and parents. One pattern I notice with many families is that testing feels intimidating at first, simply because the timeline isn't clear. Once parents understand how testing fits into the larger admissions plan, the anxiety around the test drops dramatically. For many families, standardized testing initially feels like one of the most intimidating parts of the admissions process. But once the structure of the timeline becomes clear, the experience often feels much more manageable. So if you remember just one thing from this video, let it be this. Testing timelines are not about finding a single perfect date. They're about giving your child enough time for preparation, flexibility, and clarity about where they stand academically.